All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started and allow everyone to sort of sign on while I'm doing some housekeeping things. First off, I just wanted to say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this year's first pollution prevention webinar of the series. Every year we like to have about 4 or 5 webinars, try to do them every quarter for the pollution prevention webinar series. And so today's webinar is going to be entitled Overview of Ducks Unlimited, Corporate Partnership Opportunities, and the Carbon Water Programs that they've got going on. So this webinar is being put on by the Tennessee Green Star Partnership Program in collaboration with, of course, Ducks Unlimited. My name is Caleb Powell, and I'm an environmental scientist for the Office of Sustainable Practices at TDEC, and I will be hosting the webinar today for our wonderful speakers. So just some housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is muted upon entry to reduce the amount of background noise during the webinar, but if you have any questions, and we hope that you do, or comments or concerns, something, you can't hear something right, or, the slides aren't going for you, feel free to put those questions, comments, or concerns in the chat box, and I will work on getting either those asked to our speakers or, if you have an issue, I'll work through that with you, trying to help you work through any audio, video issues that you might have. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is I'm going to just send a chat to everyone. And so you should see a chat from me that says, this is the chat box and your questions and comments here. Now you'll notice down here when you have the chat opened, there is a send to and then a drop box or a drop down box. And what you'll want to make sure, just so that I will get these questions, is either you can do the host, which is just myself, or you can do host and presenter, host, presenter, and panelist, all participants, or all panelists. You just want to make sure that the word host or all is in one of the ones that you check, so that I will see that and be able to help you out and get your questions asked. To give a brief overview of what's going to be covered today, the Ducks Unlimited conserves, restores, and manages wetlands and associated habitats for North America's waterfowl to benefit of multiple species, including people. To protect wetlands and waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited works with a range of stakeholders, including partnering with corporations and businesses on conservation projects. This webinar is going to provide an overview of Ducks Unlimited as a whole, their work with corporate and business partners on the topic of conservation, and their emerging work in carbon and water nature-based solutions. And then also, we're going to be covering a little bit of how partnering can help companies meet their sustainability goals. We know that facilities now and these huge corporate goals that are coming from the top down, sometimes you might not know how to reach those goals. And so we're hoping that Ducks Unlimited, especially through this webinar, can maybe help you find some of those solutions to those sustainability goals. Ducks Unlimited will highlight case studies of existing projects that are happening now and introduce new ideas for conservation that you might not have yet thought of. So I want to take the time now to introduce our 2 wonderful speakers. You can see their names on the screen right now. We've got Dr. Ellen Herbert and we got Jeff Hanratty. So guys, I'm going to pass it over to you and to give a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then we will get started. So appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you, Caleb. Are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. I am Ellen Herbert. I am senior scientist for Ducks Unlimited out of our national headquarters in Memphis, Tennessee. And my colleague and Jeff and I will be talking, as Caleb said, about our conservation programs and how those interface with corporate partnership opportunities and sustainability goals related to carbon and water. So we'll pause and give brief introductions about ourselves and our backgrounds. I have my PhD in ecology and hydrology and soil science from Indiana University School of Public and External Affairs. So I really focus at Ducks Unlimited on the technical aspects of our conservation work and doing quantification, science, modeling, field work related to demonstrating the value that our 15 million acres of conservation projects have to things like clean water, climate mitigation and adaptation, and resilience for communities and coastal landscapes. I'll hand it over to Jeff to talk a little bit about his background.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Jeff Hanratty. I'm a newer employee at Ducks Unlimited. I started last August. I am in my dream job. I worked for corporate America for 22 years. Most of my time was at General Mills. I had a short stint at Stanley Black & Decker before I had convinced the folks at Ducks Unlimited to hire me. So my job really at Ducks Unlimited is really just to flip the sides of the table that I was on. I was always, as a corporation, looking for help and how to move things forward, and now I'm with the conservation organization that can provide help and provide solutions and help companies be successful. So I'll talk a little bit about that. By training, I'm a civil engineer. I've got a master's degree in EHS management from the Rochester Institute of Technology. I spent a lot of my career in environmental compliance and safety compliance. I ran the auditing programs for General Mills for a while, and then my career kind of morphed into sustainability and how can we do better as a business, and how can we work on, do better on our own stuff, and then that evolved even further to how can we work on everybody else's stuff in the supply chain that, results in our products. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well, but I'm excited to be here and share, all the great things that Ducks Unlimited does for conservation and the environment, and possibly throw some stuff up against the wall and see what sticks for solutions for you.
All right, so I'm going to start out, for those of you who aren't familiar with Ducks Unlimited, giving you a little bit of overview of our history, our mission, and how we work as an organization. We are, I should say probably most importantly, headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, right near Shelby Farms Park. So we're a very proud Tennessee-based organization. But Ducks Unlimited's history goes all the way back to the Dust Bowl. We actually were chartered in the same year as the Soil Conservation Service, now the Natural Resource Conservation Service, in response to one of the largest widespread environmental crises our country has faced, the Dust Bowl. And so it was really a group of private citizens that came together and said, we have to better manage particularly wetland and grassland habitats for the benefit of the migratory birds that they enjoyed hunting for recreation. But what this has grown into over the past 85 years is an organization that spans the entirety of North America and works to benefit wildlife and people by doing habitat protection, conservation, restoration, and enhancement. And we also work in policy education. So why a North American wide enterprise? Well, Jeff and I will mostly talk about what we do in the U.S., but this is a map from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology showing the range habitat of the northern pintail, which is just one species of duck. But as you can see, where all that orange is lit up from Mexico all the way into Canada, that is the range that those birds are migrating annually. So we really have to think about habitat continentally. So we deliver our mission continentally. And that mission is really guided by our international conservation planning process. So we have a really strong scientific basis for where we work internationally and here in the United States. And we are partnered in this conservation mission to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands that also benefit wildlife and people with a lot of state and federal agencies. As well as private citizens and public corporations. And so we're going to pause here and show a really short little video that kind of talks about the conservation side of our mission. So I'll hand it over to Caleb to press play. Right, thank you, Caleb. So that is just a flavor of what we do on the landscape and why we do it. We have across North America about 1 million members and supporters who work with us in a grassroots fashion to raise matching funds to do conservation projects, as well as they participate in grassroots public policy support for voluntary incentive-based conservation programs across North America. And so how our business works, we are primarily driven, about 40% of our revenue is through federal and state habitat support programs and non-governmental partnerships. And we also have a pretty hefty portion of our budget that comes directly from individual member support. We have a really high efficiency, so 83 cents on the dollar that we raise goes directly to on-the-ground conservation programs. And the rest of that pie chart there, major gifts and sponsorships, as well as donated lands, those make up what we use for match against federal and state public dollars. So that's often how we work with private entities and public entities to bring together private-public partnerships, is by providing private match to public grant dollars. And we see a leverage ratio there of anywhere, depending on where we're working in the country, between 3 public dollars for every private dollar up to 9 public dollars for every private dollar. So we're very efficient in terms of using money towards the mission and matching public and private support together. We're somewhat unique when compared with other of our brother and sister conservation organizations in that we consider ourselves a turnkey organization. We do everything from the science of site identification, the building of these public-private partnerships, funding, We have a staff of over 60 professional engineers. On our staff, we do design and permitting, and we also do construction management. So it's a real soup to nuts type of organization, which is actually quite unique in North America. So as I said earlier, we've been around for about 85 years. We have 15 million acres of conserved wetland, grassland, and forest habitat under our belt, as well as an additional closing in on 1 billion acres of sustainable land use planning with communities, mostly indigenous communities. So unfortunately, it looks like our animations aren't working. What you would have seen here is a map populating with the projects we've done over the last 80 years, and so I'll skip through that. But it's about 15 million acres of projects all across North America. And then just to orient you a little, our headquarters is here in Memphis, Tennessee, and we also have offices around regions. We're split into 4 different areas. We also have a government affairs office in DC, and then our sister organizations, Ducks Unlimited Mexico, DUMAC, and Ducks Unlimited of Canada, that we work with internationally but are legally separate entities. When we think about where Ducks Unlimited works, we have conservation priority areas in this map in red, green, and yellow. Where we are here in the state of Tennessee, our highest level geographies are going to be in western Tennessee, but you'll see further on in the presentation that we've worked pretty much all over western and central Tennessee around major water bodies and wetland complexes and public lands. So that's sort of where we prioritize our on-the-ground habitat activities and where most of our staff is located. And so what Jeff and I are going to talk about a little bit today is wetlands as sort of a premier, what's now called nature-based solution. So nature-based solutions, or some people call it natural or green infrastructure, utilize ecological processes to achieve engineering objectives and provide multiple benefits. In this diagram, you can see sort of the wetlands' ability to dissipate stream energy, stormwater, provide groundwater recharge, especially important here in western Tennessee, break down bacteria and contaminants, filter sediments and agricultural runoff, and in some cases industrial runoff, and slow the release of water onto the landscape. Some examples of the nature-based solutions that Ducks Unlimited routinely delivers are, of course, wetland restoration, submerged aquatic vegetation, regenerative agriculture, reforestation, building secondary channels and spillways, and doing controlled overtopping, and then a little bit less relevant here in Tennessee, coastal breakwaters. But basically engineering natural systems for engineering objectives, sometimes in lieu of and sometimes in combination with traditional concrete gray infrastructure. So as it relates to the objectives of things like manufacturing facilities or corporate sustainability, I'm going to give a couple examples of what we've done along this theme of nature-based solutions. So we've worked with several corporations across North America on looking at goals they have around water replenishment and water efficiency in the water-stressed basins in which they have facilities. So this is just a little map of those water-stressed basins. You can see western Tennessee, the edge of western Tennessee lies in one of those. But one of our most recent examples is working on several projects with PepsiCo, but PepsiCo's facilities have a goal of replenishing 100% of the water that they use back into local watersheds, and this is really driven by their investors as well as their local communities in the regions of their facilities. And so we've worked with them to identify projects in these water-stressed basins where they have manufacturing facilities to implement habitat restoration projects. And there on the right, you can see a little project in the Trinity River Basin in Texas, where we've been working with PepsiCo, Meta, Facebook, and the Bonneville Environmental Foundation to do wetland restorations in that watershed that also clean and purify water that eventually goes back into the Metro Fort Worth area drinking water system, and in fact, at any given time can provide up to 20% of the drinking water to that system. So that's kind of a neat project we've worked on that's a sort of public-private partnership. Another one a little closer to home is our partnership with the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. That is Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland and our CEO Adam Putnam. But this is a partnership where we are working with cities and towns to build natural infrastructure projects to absorb floodwater, provide public recreation and tourism, increase migratory bird habitat, improve water quality, and sequester carbon, all in the goals of sustainability for those municipalities and the businesses within them. We have a lot of pilot projects up and down the river, but really quickly, those are a combination of engineering projects and protection projects that are designed to abate stormwater and provide recreational opportunities. And we have some of those here in Tennessee and just across the river in West Memphis. A really good example of that is going to be a project that we're just getting started on, Horseshoe Lake State Park in the St. Louis metro area. This state park accepts the stormwater runoff from, I believe, 11 of 14 storm drains in the Metro East St. Louis area. And so what we're doing is sort of rejiggering the plumbing here to make that stormwater runoff back up less frequently into the industrial and residential areas of the metro area. We also have a fairly strong and growing carbon and greenhouse gas offset program. I think Jeff will talk a little bit more about that when he talks about corporate goals. But we provide offsets as well as developing, particularly with food and beverage companies, insetting programs to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint of the agricultural commodities that they're supplying. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff to talk about the world of corporate sustainability and how we fit into that.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, we could have just showed the video, and then we could have talked about a lot of other things, but that video really kind of sums up a lot of this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit. I know I did ask Caleb for the list of attendees, and not every one of you is super familiar with corporate sustainability potentially, so I thought I'd spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about that and what I've seen over my several years in corporate sustainability and really how companies are evolving or will evolve their programs over time. So as all of you are aware, compliance is first. You don't have sustainability if you can't maintain compliance. Your business will only be focused on maintaining compliance or getting into compliance. So that's like table stakes just to get into the sustainability game, as all of you likely know. And then a lot of times we move directly into operational efficiency. It's like, well, how much energy do we use? How much water do we use? And we look at that type of stuff, and we really try to get better on those various outcomes in our own footprints, whether it's manufacturing or service providing, whatever, but work on that operational efficiency. And then when we start to get better at that, usually your sales and marketing people hear about it, and they want to tell others about how great your company is or your corporation is about what they're doing to help out sustainability or Mother Earth, etc. And so then it becomes kind of a corporate image and storytelling opportunity, and there's lots of great sustainability reports and stories that you see where folks are talking about installing solar panels or buying renewable electricity to improve their footprint, really trying to give the corporate a great name, and really it's almost maintaining a license to operate. If you're not doing something positive for the environment, you're not doing anything as far as most outsiders will think. So you really want to make sure that you're telling that story. And then ultimately it moves on from there to product innovation and trying to make your products or your service greener and better for the environment, and the sustainability becomes your own. And so I call that claims. And so rather than having someone do something for you and say that you're associated with it, you might actually do something yourself with your own supply chain and your own products and claim, for example, a green product. And those claims get tricky, particularly if they have to go through the law department. But that really is the future. The way that we're going to be successful here is not the nice-to-dos, it's the must-dos and really greening our products, et cetera. And so what we call it, I heard this used as Caleb introduced the group, pollution prevention. I think pollution prevention was an old term when I started my career, so I'm not bashing it, it's just that's what we start with. And that's really the way that EPA talked about this. And then we also use words like mitigation. And so Ellen will talk a little bit about mitigation. And so there's compliance programs around wetlands. And there's a no net loss expectation around wetlands. And so if you're going to expand your parking lot and you're going to cover, you need to fill in a wetland or you want to fill in a wetland, you got to build one somewhere else or have one built somewhere else. And so we're involved in that. As we build wetlands, we can create credits and we can help companies, do what they need to do while they're mitigating this impact. But it's still, it's a net loss program. It's really not getting better. It's just trying to keep us where we're at. And then we use words like environmental stewardship. I think that's kind of the next stage that we've gone through over the years and called it environmental stewardship. Then we came up with a broader word called sustainability. And, as far as I'm concerned, sustainability is, the definition of that is, what we do today doesn't compromise the future, doesn't compromise the people of the future, the planet of the future, but we're able to thrive today while not compromising that. But it's still a no net loss type of thing. Let's just make sure that it's good enough. And then we've dropped in this word environmental, social, and governance. And so this is kind of some of the attorneys and the investors wanting to get in on the movement, as well as social impact is a big deal, and it's always been a part of sustainability, but depending on where you sit in a company, it might just be environmental for you, but it is social, and that's really come forward a long way in recent years. And then now the latest buzzword, which companies are using, Walmart kind of coined this, it's regeneration, and it's making things better than they are today. And that's really the way I think about sustainability, is how can we do a lot more good rather than trying to do less bad. And so there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but that's really how I see our efforts from corporate's point of view or from a conservation point of view. And one of the reasons I'm excited to work for Ducks Unlimited is that's what the organization does. There was recently a report that came out on, it was the bird report, I'm trying to remember what the exact name of it was, but they basically said that almost all species of birds have declined significantly with the exception of waterfowl. And the reason that is there's this million-person or entity organization that cares a lot about waterfowl. And we really work hard to create more, and that's regeneration at work, if you ask me. And so how do companies set targets? In the past, when I first started, we just thought we would come up with targets that we thought we could do. And, you wanted to under-promise and over-deliver and make sure that you met your goal that you told your executives that you could do. Or it was just a guesstimate. Like, we didn't know. Well, let's do 10% and see how that works out. It was really unscientific. And so there's a lot of large NGO-type groups like your WRI, the World Resources Institute, I get that right, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, CERES, which is the Council for Environmental Responsible Economies, or Coalition, one of the two. I always get those words mixed up. But they're like, we got to use science for these targets. It's great that corporations are setting targets, but we have to have some sort of science basis for these targets. So these groups got together along with companies themselves and tried to develop these networks to understand how to set a science-based goal, so that when you talk externally to the rest of the world about your goal, you can claim that it was science-based. So, for example, when you set a science-based target around climate, you're taking your fair share of the Earth's climate budget, which has been, attributed to your country, towards your sector, and you can really say this is what our fair share is. And most CEOs want to do their fair share. Very few want to do less. And I would say many don't really want to do more because they got so many different things they need to work on. But everybody wants to do their fair share, and that's what's kind of cool about this. So there's one for climate. There's one that's evolving for nature, which will include biodiversity. And there's one that's recently been developed for water via WWF and others. And so as you can see, companies are jumping on board, and they're taking action with these public target setting consensuses. And so what do those targets look like? So I saw in the email list that there was someone from Eastman. I don't know if anyone's on from Eastman, but I went and lifted this stuff off of Eastman's sustainability website. And so it's big and bold. We're going to be carbon neutral. And so by 2050, Eastman's going to be carbon neutral. And so I didn't dig in and spend a lot of time figuring out what that means and what they're really going to do. But carbon neutral is a big deal. And it's really, making sure that whatever impact you make is balanced back to zero. And then over on the right, there's a list of commitments: reducing absolute Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 1/3, and that's, Scope 1 is fuel you burn, and Scope 2 is electricity you buy. And so that's really an internal-facing goal for most companies, and you're working on your own stuff. And then the next one is about renewable electricity, and the one after that is about Scope 3. Well, Scope 3 is everything else. And that's really where we help out a lot of companies, is in Scope 3. In that footprint upstream of your company, whether it's in mining or chemical manufacturing or agriculture or what have you, we're working up in that area to help companies be successful. And that's what Ellen referred to as, rather than an offset, it's more of an inset, because the company is actually causing that improvement to happen upstream as opposed to just purchasing it. So that's what one looks like. Here's one in terms of water that Cargill has. They've got a water target that they've used that WWF context space. So this is science-based for this company. This is a giant company, to restore 600 billion liters of water. I can't even fathom how much water that is. Swimming pools, stadiums, however much, that's a lot of water. And so I put a little duck head next to it because, well, we helped them with that. And I'll talk more about that later. Reduce 5 million kilograms of water pollutants. And this is mainly from their business, which is agriculture. And we can help with that as well. Implementing water stewardship programs at their facilities. We're not really helping them with that. They're working within their 4 walls. And then improve safe drinking water access in their 25 priority watersheds. And so that's all about the WASH standard and really focusing on that. And then, so Coke was one of the very first companies to have a replenish goal. They said probably 10 years ago, we're going to replenish all of the water that goes into our beverages and goes into fountain drinks by 20 or something like that. And they did it. And they didn't particularly do it in all of the watersheds where the water is actually consumed, because that's really complicated, because you think about where's a Coke fountain machine, just about everywhere. But all of these companies have jumped on board with that because it is a context-based goal when you strive to replace the water where you use it. And so a lot of these companies, that's really where they're focused on. So if they're focused on replenishing water in a place that we care about, we're probably working with them on that, because we're pushing projects forward as fast as we can to conserve wetlands and establish habitat, which, again, by the way, helps with replenish goals. So they're happy to participate in that. So how do these companies act against these targets once they have them? Well, a lot of times it starts with philanthropy. Companies that have a charitable giving part of their business, it's a great way to get started and give to a nonprofit that can help advance improvements for the greater good. It's not particularly the company's impact. The company can claim that they're part of it and that, you know, they helped it happen, but likely it's not really offsetting or impacting the company's impact itself. And then the next thing they'll do is they'll act through others, you know, for the greater good. But it's still tied to the company's impact. So I just showed you that Eastman's goal is to buy renewable energy. So they may not be putting up solar panels and windmills, but they're buying energy from those systems that is directly tied to the amount of electricity they consume and their actual impact. Other companies are buying offsets to offset what their impact is. And then I just gave the example of replenishing aquifers. And so getting others to do good and then tie it to your company's impact is just a more advanced claim when I go back to, you know, back to telling your story and telling the world the great things that you're doing to offset your impact. Then companies will act on their own stuff, you know, which a lot of you are probably impacted by. When someone says we're going to reduce the water in our facilities by 10%, it comes down on each facility saying, all right, how are you going to do that? And work on reducing that consumption. You know, you're either reducing it or you're changing the way you do things, you're changing the way you buy things, change the way you paint things or whatever it is. But a lot of companies are going to focus on working on their own stuff. And then finally, they start to work on getting others to act on their own stuff, on their behalf. And this is kind of that supply chain thing where you might ask companies that sell you some of your equipment and your ingredients, your parts, your inventory, say, hey, how come you don't have a renewable electricity goal? You should work on that too. And there's this pushing that's going up and down the supply chain that's helping us all, you know, lift up sustainability. And so really down at the bottom, it's moving from story time to validated claim, and in all places in between. And companies are working in both places. You know, validated claim is really saying we did this, and our product is better than maybe someone else's because of the things that we're doing in the environment. That's a big claim to make, and some companies want to do that. So the SEC is starting to ask questions and dig in and get involved in that. And it's getting, you know, folks are a little nervous about it, but I think it's all good. It's all good because, you know, when we see something on a label, you're gonna believe it, and you're gonna feel okay believing it. And so finally, back to this Cargill example that I showed in terms of the, you know, the restoration. There's a couple things that we've done for Cargill that's helped them meet their goals. So we've got this Tamarack Ranch wetland conveyance. It pumps. It's really historical wetland improvement that we're doing. It's really managing them better. It's putting in better pumps. It's managing water levels so that it maintains its ability to store water and managing the water through a complex. This is 89 wetland acres, 4.9 million acres, which is not much compared to 600 billion, but you know, it's all steps forward. We've also worked on Ogallala recharge. So in the Plains state, you know, the Ogallala aquifer is huge, and it's dropping significantly because there's so much agriculture and communities pumping on it. And so we've been really focused on improving that and getting water back in to the ground. And so this shows some of those playa wetlands that we've been working on, and basically paying farmers to preserve these areas, even be it temporarily, you know, 15 to 30 years, but protect these areas so that when we do get the rain, the water pools up and soaks into the ground, not ditch them so the water just goes away. And you know, so the farmer is restricted from being able to plant crops in these areas in wet years, but in dry years they can plant crops in these areas. But then when the water does come, it stays there and goes back into the ground rather than, you know, down a ditch and into the rivers and away and out to sea. Once it's out to sea, it's lost till it rains again. And then finally, this is an example of a green energy supplier. And you think, well, a green energy supplier still needs to work on sustainability? Well, yes, they do, because solar panels have impact, windmills have impact. So this company wanted to do something to manage and work against some of the impact that their equipment has. And so one of the negative issues that can come with windmills is impact on bats. And so they had us help them. They helped us financially, and we went and improved a bunch of forest and wood floodplain and wetlands and restored some timber stands so the bats had somewhere to roost and hang out and flourish. And so really they were working on their own environmental footprint and impact. Now I'll turn it back to Ellen.
Yeah, so I will spend the last couple minutes here getting a little bit more local, and I apologize, this map is not super easy to read, but all those little green dots are projects in Tennessee, and as I sort of indicated, most of those projects are in western Tennessee around major national wildlife refuges and around the river itself and, you know, the flatter parts of the state of Tennessee where wetlands occur more frequently. So we've done about 46,000 acres of conservation in the state of Tennessee to date, have a lot of active projects in western Tennessee. One of the things that Jeff alluded to a little bit is we've also helped some companies in Tennessee and Tennessee Department of Transportation with mitigation. So we have mitigation service areas. Our main ones in the south are around the Memphis area, the Mount Tina Creek and the Mississippi Alluvial Valley. And then we have, you can see on this map, we have some things up north as well. But we've also helped with compliance around mitigation banking and in lieu fee programs for companies locally, Mount Tina. And then as we broaden out to sort of our impact in the geography, this is some just quick snapshot of some of our outcomes from the co-benefits of our conservation work in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley. This is in our conservation year 2017. So 33.3 billion gallons of water replenished on the landscape, 161,000 tons of carbon dioxide, 7.6 million pounds of fertilizer, almost $5.8 million in the value of natural capital, and then of course about 7 million duck energy days. So that's the caloric energy that migratory birds need every day to sustain their migratory patterns. And we have, especially in this region, a lot of really strong supply chain partnerships. So we just received an $80 million award from USDA to work on the rice supply chain. And so we've got a lot of important rice manufacturers here in Memphis, particularly Kellogg's and others. And so this is an attempt to really reduce the impact of both water use and greenhouse gases in rice production systems in the Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, Arkansas, Upper Mississippi River embayment groundwater system, as well as some other key geographies in the United States, and also incorporate some social equity into that, working with National Black Growers Council to try to improve their access to farm financing and conservation practices. So it's a really neat partnership, but it's one of several projects that we have going in particularly food and beverage supply chains. And we'll wrap up here with, as Jeff says, helping you do more good rather than just less bad. So talking about proactive activities rather than just regulatory compliance. And we've left up some contact information here that I'm sure Caleb can also help distribute post-webinar for how to contact us. Jeff as our lead on the corporate side, myself as the lead on sort of the science and technical side, and then Sage Stockton, who is listed there, is our lead for development and partnerships within the state of Tennessee itself. So he's sort of a local contact. So with that, I think we have some time for Caleb to help us field questions.
Yeah, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please send those in the chat. I just sent another one reminding everyone where that is. So send those to me, and we'll get those asked. I have one question, and I think you maybe sort of answered it while just talking about the contact information, but say there's a facility that wants to look at opportunities to collaborate with DU or Ducks Unlimited to maybe attack some of these corporate sustainability goals. Where do they start at?
Yeah, I will say the 3 emails on this list. If you're in Tennessee, maybe if you're thinking of partner facilities that are outside of Tennessee, you could leave Sage off that list. But Jeff and I are a very good starting point to get you directed to the right teams in a relevant geography.
Yeah, I had that question down, but then so you sort of answered it before because you said that Jeff is more of like the corporate side of things. So, but I'm sure that you two together are a great team to sort of help find solutions for some of those problems or some of those goals that facilities might have. Let me check if there's any. There hasn't been any questions come in as of right now. I know sometimes when we do these webinars, we'll be done and then I'll have dinner and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have asked that question. So I want everyone to know that it's later on, or as the weeks go by and you maybe were like, oh man, I wish I would have asked that question during the webinar. Always feel free to reach out to myself, or I'm sure any of these contacts on the screen right here. But yeah, if for some reason you don't write these down and you just have a question like, oh yeah, I wish I would have got that answered, you can always email me. And if you're on the call right now, then you should have my email. I'm sure that I send quite a bit of emails to everyone about webinars and workshops and stuff like that. But let's see, I'm not seeing any questions come in as of right now. But like I said, if those do come in, I'll work with you guys to get those answered, and then we can put those into maybe the follow-up that will be coming after, probably next week with, and actually that brings me to my next point. This webinar is being recorded right now, and then if you guys feel comfortable with it, I'll talk to you maybe offline about when we do the follow-up email for this webinar. I'll send the recording link. It'll be on our YouTube channel, so if there were some things that you wanted to go back over or you didn't really listen to as much, that you want to be able, or show somebody the webinar, show somebody in your facility or upper management, we'll have access to that for you guys. And then depending on what you guys say, a lot of times we'll share the slides. I don't know if some of those case studies, we might have to take some of those out, or I don't know how that, but we'll work through that together and then share what we're able to with everyone that has attended. Let me see. Oh, I did want to mention that our next pollution prevention webinar is going to be April 12th. I will be sending out an invitation. It is going to be from 1 to 2 p.m. Central, just like this one was. I will be sending out an email invitation, much like the one that you got for this webinar very soon. We've already got I'm going to pull up the topic and our speakers for that. The spring webinar is going to be protecting Tennessee's natural resources. So right alongside, very similar topics as this webinar, and we're going to be hearing from the executive director of Ten Green Land Conservancy. Oh my goodness. And then also the deputy director of Ten Green as well. So keep a lookout for those. We really appreciate everyone's interactions and participation in this webinar. Also, huge shout out to our speakers. Thank you so much, Ellen and Jeff. We appreciate the time that you put into this, and then just the time that you put into Ducks Unlimited and the conservation efforts that you guys do. We're very appreciative. We're excited about this information, and be on the lookout for upcoming webinars and the follow-up for this webinar. Everyone have a great rest of the week.